Hi, local main character Zep here. It's a Thursday, so I was lamenting over what Bakugan could have been. It's also what I do every other day of the week. I don't think a single Bakugan series has ever really hit the nail on the head.
The original series lacked a lot of gameplay substance in the multiple systems it had over its lifetime. Ball designs got very bumpy, and instead of increasing the depth of play, they introduced more pieces of plastic with trading cards attached that brought more of the same gameplay mechanics into the game, except with action figures and vehicle playsets to lug around. The anime was also a mixed bag, especially in later seasons. We saw the toys in the show, but they sure did turn into monsters that were used in a game that never fully resembled any real-life system. It was cool, but also eventually just became kaiju fights with a health meter. Starting as a Gen 1.5 in Japan, Bakutech was a near-perfect execution of the Bakugan concept. It focused on their role as a skill-based battle toy with physics interactions, which was the origin of the series. The series had a Beyblade design mentality that balanced gimmicks with gameplay viability. The Bakugan were round, complex, beautiful, and had gimmicks that affected how they interacted with other Bakugan. Bakutech was built from the ground up on the gameplay mechanic of knocking an opponent's Bakugan off of a card to capture that card, or landing two of your own on a single card to capture a card. Both rolling skill and Bakugan placement were important. Unfortunately, its anime was released via 5-minute long web shorts, so it cut down on what could have been something a lot more special. The toys took front and center as actual toys, and the game played was a one-to-one with the actual physical line. That's good for a toy commercial. I just wish it was longer than a toy commercial. I also wish it released outside of Japan. Finally, the reboot has a lot of cool Bakugan designs, and too many behind-the-scenes issue to cover in a short introduction. It had a TCG that Bakugan's mother company, Spin Master, screwed over, so the only gameplay left supported are two stripped-down toy battling games that boil down to war with more vaguely defined gameplay mechanics.
But at least it's always been a nice-looking line of collectible transformable balls. And other shapes. Most of the time.
I have no complaints about Bakutech's figures, except maybe some of the manual parts. They're all really well designed and feel premium. There's design cohesion across the whole line that makes a transition from ball to creature always feel natural. They're like really good Transformers that only turn into balls. The original series had its winners, but there's so many manual parts on the designs that cheapen the transformations. It's supposed to be a magical pop-open transition from marble to creature, but if I have to unfold so many pieces, the effect is just ruined. Also, mobile assault vehicles and mectogons were mistakes that ruined the integrity of what the toy line was supposed to be. That is just an action figure, I want marbles. The reboot has some really good and some really designs. Battle Planet Pegatrix is a perfect Bakugan by every measure. Battle Planet Dragonoid Ultra has really tiny arms and a jetpack. So what makes a Bakugan good, and what makes the concept deliver on its promise of being a marble that transforms into a monster? An exploding sphere. A Bakugan. I honestly think we could just choose one ball form throughout the series run and be able to point out all of the elements that make a platonic ideal of a Bakugan. Not a perfect Bakugan, just one that has all of the features a good ball form should. Seeing as we're not looking for perfect, Bakutech are off the table, we cannot expect the whole series to elevate itself to the glory of God. We should also exclude any reboot gons. They have a lot going on. That's not a bad thing, it's just not a good teaching tool for the bare basics. So let's get back to the bare basics. The original 28mm Bakugan. Released at a time before gates were separated into different colors and ability cards were not yet existent in the way they are in the legacy game you likely know of, Bakugan were 28mm in diameter. That's quite small, only the size of a shooter marble. Here's one compared to a 32mm size, or B2, the size you're likely familiar with. And here's those compared to a 36mm size, the standard size for reboot gons, or some legacy and tech stuff. Also one 24mm nanogon just for fun, and a 100mm Deca. And here's a size comparison picture I found on the internet for Drothron. The 28mm size limited the complexity of designs that were possible. In fact, the base Hydronoid ball form was too complex to do in this size, so it ended up releasing in 32mm after its evolutions. Usually, the opening mechanism was one hinge latch on the inside of the Bakugan that released one load-bearing piece that held the rest of the spring-loaded parts in place. On this Gorum, it's the shield. On Falconeer, it's the body. This led to a lot of designs being very basic, almost shell-former-ish. It really devolves into a few limbs and sometimes a head folding out and revealing the body for a good chunk of early Gons. It's understandable why Bakugan got bigger over time. That and Choking Hazard. One Bakugan that thrived design-wise despite its size is Dragonoid, our teaching tool for today. Yes, Dragonoid, known as Juggernaut in the Nihongo, is my favorite Bakugan when it comes to explaining the ideals that sell the fantasy of these balls that hide beasts. In its closed state, it's a perfect sphere, which is our first ideal feature. The ability to roll? That's kind of important for its use in a game and fantasy experience where you roll the marble out onto a magnetizable surface and it pops open into a little critter. The markings on the outside don't much reveal the creature on the inside, but they do make the ball very easy to identify and give just enough information to maybe guess what's inside. The closed ball is a mystery with clues and character. We also see the legacy symbol for Ventus, or Zephyros if you're insufferable, which makes gameplay elements easy to identify. The first year of reboot figures did not have symbols on their balls, meaning that you had to guess their alignment just by color. Bakugan is a series that likes to play with color a lot, so that's bad. Luckily, the reboot would add symbols the next year. The final part of the closed ball I'd like to address is the magnet, which is covered up. That might not sound surprising, but it wasn't always the norm. Look at Golem's exposed magnet here. That's, not good for obvious reasons. The very early releases had exposed magnets like this one, and you can see that they have exposed magnets in the Battle Brawlers Season 1 anime as well. They did cover up the hole in later releases, but that does lead to one issue I have with Juggernaut here, that may or may not be an issue depending on your taste or the purpose of the given Bakugan line. On Golem, at a glance, this is the magnet. On Raptor, you can instantly see this indent where the magnet is. On Juggernaut, well, you can see the magnet, but it's not immediately clear at first. On a lot of Japanese Bakugan releases, they mark the magnet. It's important to be able to tell where it is for rolling, but a lot of international releases just settle for leaving a flat plane unmarked. Does the marking of the magnet disrupt the design flow? Yeah, but just as much as the attribute or faction symbol does. Or the hinges. And if that doesn't, certainly the power number will. But if putting a symbol for the magnet is too much, I at least wish they molded in a better identifier than a flat plane, like the indent on Raptor here. Well, that's enough talk about the magnet. Let's use it. Here we can see that every important part of this Bakugan is automatic. No extra feet, arms, or horns to unfold. The jaw is manual, but that's more for posability than it is necessary for the transformation. Again, when a Bakugan transforms, it's supposed to be transforming into a monster form. Having further steps in that process lessens the effect. Also, having to transform it further means that you can't have it fully transform in a game, which is kind of a bummer. Mandatory manual parts hinder the fantasy somewhat. Optional manual parts, however, are just more play features meant for display. Those are neat! They make Bakugan have a sense of life to them. It also makes the monster mode more than a chunk of plastic, which also serves the fantasy. Oh hey, more information! Opening the ball literally reveals its true power, which is sick! I like how the design is able to incorporate the shape of the ball naturally into its turtle motif by having the shell forming act as a shell. The designer cleverly made use of the limitations of the 28mm size well. The shapes of all of the extremities, like the feet, the tail, and the head, are all very geometric and simple. They're more presentational than representational, which means they're not trying to look like the real thing, just evoke it. Since the real thing it's based off doesn't really exist, that works very well. Your mind can fill in the details, and that's exciting. The monster feels real because your mind extrapolates this little idol into something that seems real to you. Less is more here. Some reboot Bakugan, especially a lot of the Trox line, have an issue where they try to represent the creature mode too faithfully. This causes the more organically shaped details to clash with the visible hinges, screws, and the fact this thing is clearly a monster smashed inside the form factor of a marble. It's a little ball-shaped prison. The organic and geometric motifs clash. It's often safer to lean into presentational geometric motifs. Bakutech did, and they look great. They all have a sense of life and personality to them without explicitly looking like a living creature. They also have the benefit of not having a monster design to match in most cases, which helps them greatly. I feel like the marble design should always come before the monster design for the best results. Since that won't be the case in most series, I think more liberties should be taken to at least make the marble look good. finally, let's talk about gimmicks. Dragonoid here is particularly bottom-heavy, making them really good for spin shots. Its design naturally lends itself to a certain style of play without compromising aesthetics. I think all Bakugan should do that to some extent, whether the gimmick be taking up a lot of space or being incredibly solid and hard to knock around. Remember when I said finally? I was lying. One more thing, let's talk about color. You can look at this and it's nice. That should be a trend in Bakugan, but it seldom is due to their rampant experimentation with color variants, or lack of painted detail at times, or making their Bakugan look like cheese. So, for a rundown, Dragonoid or Juggernaut represents that Bakugan should be round or at least rollable. This makes the toy usable, should be recognizable when closed but not reveal the final design. This accentuates the change between the modes, making the transformation all the more extreme and otherworldly. It's also nice to tell which Bakugan you're holding when it's closed, or identify your opponent's Bakugan if you get skilled enough. Should reveal more hidden information when open for gameplay and thematic reasons. Unveiling hidden power as a monster serves the fantasy. Should fully transform automatically when it pops open, with any manual parts being lively flare. This sells the hidden living monster aspect better than having it be a multi-step manual process where you do more work than the actual beast. Should have a presentational geometric design if an organic one can't be pulled off, which is most of the time. Having the Bakugan convey its creature form through a totem-like simulacrum rather than trying to mishmash monster-accurate parts with the toy's inherently geometric details actually makes the marble's monster form seem more alive. Leave room for interpretation, essentially. And finally, its shape should matter. It's a toy that will have physics interactions. It should have some interactions with physical space. Make it big, make it tall, make it have a silicone band. Do something.
If the franchise wants to be successful in the gameplay or engaging media front, well, then either Spin Master has to get their brain cells in a row, or they have to get someone else to do it, because that's the only time the series has been competent. You know, my therapist said that venting through my issues would help me work through them. They're wrong. I'm lamenting harder now.